Okay, we're going to look at Neanderthals and their differences between modern humans, and they're a portion of our ancestry. All modern humans, except for Negroids, have 2.5 to 4%, some actually as high as 6%, Neanderthal DNA in them from a long time ago, some 35 to 60,000 years ago. And it looks like there was not one encounter set that went on, but a few series of encounter sets that went on. And we don't know how it played out at this point in any way, shape, or form, but we do know that it played out and ended at a certain way. Now, they're nowhere near as tall as our normal guy, but of course, the guy on the right is your epitomic person. And there's a lot more people today that look like the guy on the left than the guy on the right. Still, there's a lot of remnant of the people, the guy on the left. Nobody, not everyone is a giant, North European, Germanic, Nordic, giant Icelandic person over here on the right. But this does show you like the prototype of a lot of the people of modern day. And this guy in the picture in the depiction on the right is about 6'2", 6'1". The guy on the left, the Neanderthal, is really only about 5'6", 5'5". And that was their averages. This on the right doesn't actually depict our averages. Our average is below 6 foot, but just barely. And if we were to look at weight and things like that people have and the way they carry themselves, there's probably a lot more people that look more like the guy on the left than the guy on the right. They show him just a little bit more hairy than the guy on the right, and a lot of people nowadays don't even have as much chest or body hair as the guy on the right. But the facial hair is still evident, and it's something that both of these different people had on them and stuff. One thing that denotes them being not quite as tall, perhaps, as modern humans is that their tibias are much shorter. It's one way to denote easily that it's a Neanderthal and not a Cro-Magnon, even if you don't have his head, by looking at the measurements of what his arms are, his lateral torso, or his femur here, and then measuring his tibia and realizing how much shorter it is than a modern human's. You can see where they start off at the same amount and where the knees are just to begin with. Then if we look at the deficit that they have from the waist, that's the same deficit that they carry up to the top. So they have a much more robust legging on them. They're able to go through mountainous terrain like crazy, and indeed this looks more like the Andean people, and some other people nowadays have shorter tibia, and it's almost from being people that are mountainous and things. There's even a tribe of people in New Guinea that live up in a mountainous area that's real tough to climb and crawl through and to get up to, and they have the same effect too on them. So it's something that genetically is going to happen to people over time in certain environments, and they were exposed to it long enough that they became as a permanent culture almost with that trait. Other traits pass along to him too, and I don't know if you can really tell it in the picture or not, but he kind of has a little bit of auburnish type of hair, and it's believed that they carried this trait with them that we still have today with people that have blonde and lighter hair, and indeed they may have had the lighter eye trait that showed up in modern humans but didn't get expounded to the point that it did now until some 6,000 to 9,000 years ago. So let's have another look at some of these Neanderthals here real quick, and then we'll go into the study I want to look at today. Now, when they do modern creations of them and recreations and wax and things like that of them, you end up with something that looks like this in a lot of the pictures. And indeed, that to me, just screams Chuck Norris pretty much. If you were to just shave his beard and give him a one-day growth beard, it looks remarkably like Chuck Norris. Perhaps he's a little more prognostic. His nose is a little larger, but let's look at Chuck to see if we can verify that. Yeah, I wouldn't say too much different. I mean, really, if you Chuck, just look to your left or our left. That's close. The other man is just very unkept. Indeed, every time they do these depictions, all they do is take somebody and put stray extra hair, eyebrow hairs all over them, and facial hair, and make them just unkept. If you were to take Chuck Norris and you were to take him and put him out on a deserted island and give him about 2 years and come back and pick him up, bam, looks almost like a Neanderthal. Not quite the brow ridge that you see over his eyebrows that would actually be evident on a Neanderthal, but other than that, we're close. Let's look at a few more. Some of the recreations that they have of them look extremely lifelike, and you can almost see the wheels in their mind turning. And you can also tell that this man just has some stray eyebrows. He's unkept, needs a bath, needs a little bit more knowledge than he's currently got going on. But in all intents purposes, this looks like a modern human himself, and this is supposed to be your Neanderthal. Looking at him here, he almost has an Irish appearance to him. I believe his eyes look slightly greenish there. I can't even almost tell to it, but you can tell he's extremely unkept and unbearded. But I mean, I almost see an Irish person there. I see an English or European. Here's somebody's photoshopped this and made it in and put moving hair on him and everything, and threw a jacket on him. And now all of a sudden you can tell this is just a, wow, that seems to be just a dirty man from perhaps the Middle or Dark Ages, you know, and it's just somebody's had a hard-ass day. Perhaps if we just shaved that man up pretty good and everything, he'd clean up pretty well. Let's look at some more. And here's a depiction of a Neanderthal woman, and it's not too much different than what you see today. They've just really exaggerated the features on her face somewhat. It almost looks like they took a modern European and then just did that funny Photoshop thing where you geek out their face, and or they just put too big a mouth on her. It looks like somebody just stuck too big a mouth on her, but indeed not too much different than what we see today, even feminine wise. And they do carry the red-haired trait and the genes that allow that, and lighter eyes in themselves. And even if we give them a depiction that's like this is somewhat looking like an American Indian, but if we give them a depiction like this, somehow that leads to red-haired people and green-eyed and lighter people much later through us. It appears that we can attach that to it, or a gene that we both shared that somehow we allowed to exaggerate after that point. Perhaps red hair was desired and picked, and just due to natural selection, you can get that to happen a lot more, as long as something is cherished, you know, that differential that's there. Now, Neanderthals here, it shows you one on the right, the skeleton just barely in the edge of the frame there, but they're a little more squat, you know, they're a little bit more robust, but squat, almost a dwarfish type of thing. Known to be extremely strong, but they would only have been averaging 180 pounds or so. So there's things that make a little bit difference between them. They've even found footprints, but another one that I wanted to show you that they have, where this guy here, you know, is a Neanderthal too, and a depiction of him. And I don't know, you or me, that to me that looks a little bit like David Grohl. You know, David Grohl after a bad weekend. Well, maybe he doesn't think so, but I think he looks a little bit like him, perhaps, with that same type of look. So what we're going to look into here is the Shanidar Cave site that they found in northern Iraq, and it's pretty neat. It's a huge cave. It's set up here in a mountain valley, but it shows a habitation from way back in 30 to 40,000 years ago, and then rehabilitation again inside of the teens by what would have been actual modern humans and Neolithic humans. A huge cave, though, that, you know, there's thousands and thousands of caves like this all over this area and in through these mountains. And indeed, that's how the troops are having trouble fighting them now. There are people that are living in these caves, you know, and have since primordial times, and utilizing them as an actual easy and free shelter here. Now they tell you in the site here that it dates from 35 to 65,000 years ago. and the remnants have been found inside the cave. The cave also contains 2 later proto-Neolithic cemeteries, one of which dates to about 10,600 years ago. But the other one, I can't find any information on. I don't know if it comes from later or before. And if anybody knows any information about it that's looking at the video, please, put an attachment to it or something. But they only tell you about the one here that rates about 10,600 years ago, which is about the time of the Great Cataclysm that it happened. And I'm always trying to track out, and seeing that exact date right there just gets real conspicuous to me. Anyhow, the best known in Neanderthals is Shanidar 1. He survived several injuries during his life, possibly due to care from other members of his band. So they think that he was injured, and instead of left behind, like people would have done probably back then, that he was actually cared for, showing you a level of humanity that's even evident in these people at this long ago. But that and Shanidar 4, whose body lay beside a flower, that can either be explained as evidence of burial rituals or animal contamination. There's been some debate on that, but there's been so much pollen found in this one area, they say it either has to be brought from this primordial gerbil that could have come in and infested the mound and tried to make it as his burial mound, or that actually was flowers and stuff. But so it comes from in the Zagros Mountains, and the Zagros Mountains are the largest mountain range that they have in northern Iraq here. So beautiful area, and you can tell these mountain valleys and stuff, and there's caves all through here. And so it's looked at as being in the Kurdistanish area. So looking at the map here, we're right up in this area, breaking off of this river, and we're up in a higher mountain valley right about the end of my point right now. Now, there were 10 Neanderthals found at the site between the what they call a Mysterian layer. And there was hundreds of stone tools, including points, side scrapers, flakes, bones from animals like wild goats, and spur-thighed tortoises even, which is a local tortoise that they had from there. So apparently they were eating these guys and then using their bone and shell for things like that, right? So they've all been excavated and looked over. They're in different universities in different places. They ended up, over time, excavating it, find more bones to put them together as complete skeletons. Now, Shanidar 1 was known as Nandy, the Neanderthal, so they call him Nandy here. And he's aged between 40 and 50 years, remarkably old for a Neanderthal. That's equivalent to about an 80-year-old person nowadays, which is fairly rare. And just 50 years to 100 years ago would have been a lot more rare. 500 years ago would have been somebody that would, wow. But anyhow, he displayed several signs of deformity. He's one of 4 reasonably complete skeletons from the cave, which displayed trauma-related abnormalities to him, but yet continued life, which shows you that they somehow cared for him. And also you can see injuries and things. And this is just, any type of information they can get out of a skeleton. But anyhow, so it would have been somewhat debilitating to the point of day-to-day life being painful. So at one point in his life, he had suffered a violent blow to the left side of his face, which would have been this side over here, and it crushed his cranial orbit and ruined his cheekbone too. Apparently that caused a problem. He could have even been partially or totally blind in that eye. Analysis also shows that he had suffered from profound hearing loss. His left ear canal was partially blocked, and the right ear canal was completely blocked by extosises. Extosises are like bone growth, calcium growth, or bone spurs. And you can highlight it here. What is it? And extosis is a bone spur. So you can see in the picture there where it had that blob hanging off. And so apparently he had a problem with calciating bone spurs. Not something, this is a weird one here for people to have noted this, but they had this going on. He also suffered from a withered right arm. And so this withered right arm he had, which had been fractured in several places and healed, which caused a loss of his lower arm and hand. So even from the top it was withered, but then later he had lost his hand, right? So it looked like that was kind of weird. This could either be congenital or a result of childhood disease or a trauma. Who knows? Severe breakage of his arm earlier whenever he was younger. But anyhow, so he's been amputated, and indeed he was like this, where he didn't have one of his lower part of his arms and everything. The arm had healed, but the injury may have been caused some paralysis down his right side, leading to deformities of his lower legs and foot. He would have walked in a sideways fashion, slightly limping and pulling forward, and almost like Igor, if you will, people. Not that dramatic probably, but something along that line, and would have had somewhat of a painful limp. All these injuries, though, were acquired long before death, showing extensive healing, and it is being used to infer that Neanderthals looked after their sick and aged and helped them out, did all types of healing and stuff. And he's not the only one that shows this, of course, and not even at this own site. Something I want to note to you here, that the look of him, and so he has exaggerated eyebrows a little bit and things, but tell me that also doesn't look like perhaps maybe Tim Allen in the Santa Claus? You think so? Maybe, huh? A little bit. A little bit. I think it has that look. So that's Shanidar 1. But if we look at Shanidar 2, he was an adult male who had evidently died in a rock fall that happened inside the cave, and so he was healthy and alive during the time of the rock fall. His skull and bones, though, were crushed up under giant rocks. When they found him, there's evidence that Shanidar 2 was given a ritual send-off. A small pile of bones with some worked stone points made out of chert were found on top of his grave. Also, there had been a large fire by the burial site, so they noted that. Shanidar 3 was a 40 to 50-year-old male found in the same grave as Shanidar 1 and 2. A wound to the left or ninth rib suggests that an individual died of complications from a stab wound or by a sharp implement like a spear or point. Bone growth around the wound indicates that Shanidar 3 lived for at least several weeks after the injury, with the object still embedded in him. The angle of the wound rules out self-infliction, so it didn't happen there, but is consistent with an accidental or purposeful stabbing by another individual, where it could have been somebody from the tribe, or they could have actually had a fight with some other tribe over trying to keep this cave. Who knows? Recent research has suggested that the injury may have been caused by a long-range projectile, so it could have been a thrown spear or perhaps even an arrow at this time, but very doubtful. Would have been the earliest example of interpersonal or interspecific violence in the human fossil record, and the only such example amongst Neanderthals whatsoever. Presence of early modern humans, possibly armed with projectile weapons in Western Asia around the same time, raises the possibility that this is where it came from, and this is interspecies conflict. Shanidar 3 also suffered from a degenerative joint disorder in his foot, resulting from a fracture or sprain. So he would have had something like a bad form of arthritis. So it would have resulted in painful and limited movement and quite a gimp or a leg or a limp going on. The skeleton is on display at the Hall of Human Origins at the National Museum of History. So Shanidar 4 also had the flower burial in there, and there's flower clumps that are in there, and they indeed believe that maybe there was a creature called a Persian jerd, which is really a gerbil, and that they thought that they may have brought in all the flowers and ruined the burial site with that. But due to the amount of flowers that they have here, it really doesn't seem like that would be a possible thing, although many still tout it. There was yarrow there, cornflower plants, extremely beautiful bachelor's button, which everybody's familiar with, Barnabas thistle, ragwort, groundsel, hyacinth, and other medicinal plants too were put there too. So it's looked like that it may have been something that was put there by the shaman himself instead of someone else. But yeah, so it looks like Neanderthals cared after each other, and it looks like ho ho ho, Santa Claus is coming to town. Like, share, and subscribe.